This is a tale about a friend I used to have years ago. Her name is Sarah, and I met her in the 7th grade. Back then, she was a normal preteen girl, much like myself. We were best friends in 7th and 8th grade. We lost touch after our 8th grade graduation because we went to separate high schools. Public for her and private school for me. It wasn't until I moved back into my mother's house at the age of 19, pregnant and depressed from my failed relationship with both my father and ex, that I started talking to her again. We picked right back up where we left off at the end of 8th grade and quickly rebuilt our friendship back to best friend status. She even agreed to be my son's godmother. Now, I want to take a moment and tell you a bit about Sarah and myself. We were the same age, our birthdays roughly 2 weeks apart from each other. She was the oldest of 3 girls. We both appeared to look almost similar. Both are fairly pale in skin, wear glasses, and are the same height. She was a few inches taller than me, but nothing really to brag about. And weight. Her hair color was more blonde compared to my brunetteness, and she had blue eyes, which I have brown eyes. This takes place a few months after I give birth. Nothing major had happened between me and her yet, except she was a little bit bossy, but I brushed that off as being the eldest sibling. Nothing I couldn't handle. The only thing that I found weird was that she freaked out if I didn't answer her text messages back right away, even if I was at work and couldn't without fear of losing my job. But I tried brushing it off as her worrying about me. I had started dating a new guy named Josh. Sarah was actually the one that introduced the two of us because Josh was a good friend with her boyfriend Rob. Naturally, I started spending a little bit more time with Josh, but still spent a lot of my time with Sarah. She didn't take to this very well and tried causing problems for me and Josh. After having a sit down with Sarah, telling her I wasn't giving up our friendship, but neither was I going to push a guy I really liked away, she seemed to have gotten the message and backed off. Stuff hit the fan shortly after Josh and I moved into an apartment together. Sarah demanded to spend more time with me while Josh was at work. I really had no problem with it, but her bossiness started to reach unbearable levels. She didn't ask to stay for dinner. She simply said she was staying. Asking her to leave for the night fell upon deaf ears, and many times she crashed on our sofa, causing any possible sexy times with Josh to fade. Got to the point she started tagging along on our dates, so we simply started not going out. I tried talking to her, but she kept saying if I were a real friend, I wouldn't mind her being there all the time. Well, we managed to get one free weekend without Sarah. She had gone to some water park with her family, so Josh and I got to spend some much needed alone time together. However, because of the strain Sarah caused us, we had a hard time enjoying each other. I refused to end my relationship with him, and we tried hard to work it out. We tried talking to her boyfriend Rob, asking if he could help us. He said they were planning on getting an apartment together at the beginning of the following month. She was still living with her parents at this point, but told us it was looking like it was going to be in the same complex as us. I could deal with that. I figured she would just want to spend time in her new place, decorating it and hosting dinners for her friends and families. Also note, I had gotten my hair done earlier in the week. I got an awesome new haircut that looked great and I loved it a lot. I got many compliments on it from various friends. Well, when Sarah came back from her mini vacation, she had dyed her hair the same color as mine and gotten it cut the exact same way. I didn't really mind too much. It was a pretty sweet haircut, but both Josh and I couldn't get over how weird it was that we were pretty much looking like twins. She even got colored contacts to wear under their glasses that changed her eyes to the color of brown, like mine. One night later that week, I was hanging out with another mutual friend of ours without Sarah. Her name was Heather. Heather and I had gotten around to talking about Sarah when Heather said casually, "You know, she is jealous of your life, right? She's even got a huge crush on Josh and you." I really had no idea. She didn't say anything about it to me, and I had no idea she harbored feelings like that for me. And she's had many different boyfriends over the years. After that, I started to notice a shift in Sarah. She wanted to spend even more time alone with me, and oddly enough, more alone time with just Josh. One of these nights, she tried to kiss me. Now, I have no problem with somebody being gay. I have many other friends who are, but I am not, and everyone knows it. I told her this, and she went crazy. Told me I was a lying cunt, and that I was leading her on, and that I had to kiss her back because she said so. I told her no, I didn't, and I didn't lead her on. She left shortly after to meet up with Rob and Josh while I took care of my son. I didn't really think anything of it until Rob came over, saying Sarah kicked him out of the house because she wanted to talk to Josh alone. I filled Rob in on what happened, what Heather said, and my feelings. He sensed something weird was going on. I got Heather to come over to watch my son while Rob and I went back to their apartment to confront her. Found her in bed with Josh. Naturally, both Rob and I were upset. So we just left, and he crashed on my sofa for the night. Though I don't think either of us really did much sleeping. The next day, I broke up with Josh and Rob broke up with Sarah. Rob ended up moving back in with his father and just cut ties with Sarah and Josh completely. Sarah blamed me for the ending of her relationship with Rob and vowed to make my life a living hell because of it. She kept her apartment in the same complex as mine and tried very hard to get me in trouble with our landlord. At random times, the landlord would stop by, saying I had a noise complaint against me or saying that somebody complained about some awful smell coming from my place. After the third time, he came by saying somebody saw a rat coming out of my door. He realized someone was just trying to cause me trouble. I had told him, but he has a job to do, I guess. When Sarah learned that wasn't working, she started calling my home phone and cell phone at random times. Never said anything and all the calls were restricted, but I knew it was her. From my window, I could see into her apartment and always saw her looking out of my window while on the phone. On the phone were the exact times my phones were ringing. I quickly changed my phone numbers, and that was the end of that day. No one besides my mom and work had them, and neither cared for Sarah so much after learning what she had done. When she realized she couldn't get a hold of me via phone, she took to blowing up my email and MySpace or Facebook. Obviously, it didn't take me long to block her on that. However, this takes the cake. Apparently, she had a copy of my key. I don't know how she got it, because I never gave her one. I figured Josh might have given her one when they started to be sexually active, or else she just stole Josh's and made her own. She took to entering my house when I wasn't home. At first, I started noticing little things disappearing or being moved. My bills were no longer on the kitchen counter, but on the dining table. My favorite shirt had gone missing. Cordless phone across the room from where I last remember setting it down. I thought I was simply losing it and misplacing things. I am a bit scatterbrained sometimes, but not that much. This went on for 2 or 3 weeks until bigger things were missing. My son's DVD player, my keyboard, cell phone charger, bath soap, towels, and even my son's baby blanket were all taken. Naturally, I did the most logical thing and called the police and landlord. The landlord changed out my locks ASAP, and the cops agreed to talk to Sarah. They said they wouldn't be able to do anything unless she let them in and or admitted it, but they would still try to talk to her. And this is what I was told. They knocked on the door, and she opened it wide enough for them to see the wall behind her. On this wall were hundreds of photos of me, either alone at work or at the store with my son at the park. It wouldn't have been so creepy if it weren't for the fact that she wrote in big letters with red paint, "Die," with my name, "You effing bitch." It covered some of the photos in the wall. The police were able to search her place. They found journals full of her writing saying how she wanted to kill me and how she was going to do it and other screwed up things. She had my work schedule written on her calendar, not that it was hard to guess it. It was the same every week, and on a certain day, she had it circled and marked as Kill Day. Police found an unregistered gun and a huge knife. She was arrested. I promptly moved out and back into my mother's house, found a new job, and changed my appearance. I cut off contact with all of our mutual friends. Not that we had many, and found a new job. I haven't seen or heard from her in 3 years now. For all I know, she is still in jail. I just count my lucky stars. I want to be clear as possible about something before I start. We broke up mutually. That is not me rewriting history to make myself look better. We sat down together on a Sunday afternoon in his apartment and had a calm adult conversation about how things weren't working, and I agreed that ending it was the right call. We hugged, I cried a little, he did too. We said we cared about each other and wished each other well, and that was it. I drove home feeling sad, but also okay-ish, like we handled it like adults. That was 18 months ago or so. I don't think about that afternoon the same way anymore. His name is Derek. We'd been together almost a year, met through work friends, and dated the normal way. Nothing intense or dramatic about any of it. He was funny and considerate, and we got along well enough. But something was missing, and we both felt it, and neither of us wanted to drag it out. He seemed fine, and I seemed fine. We were fine. He texted me 3 days after the breakup just to check in. I responded. We were friendly. It was nice, actually. Then he texted again 2 days after that, then the day after that. I kept responding because I had no reason not to. It was pleasant enough, and I genuinely had no bad feelings toward it. Then the text changed. Not dramatically at first, just a shift in a tone. A warmth that was slightly more than friendly, and references to things we'd done together with a weight behind them that hadn't been there before. I told myself he was just processing, that breakups hit people differently and at different times, and that he'd level out. He sent a long message one night saying he thought we'd made a mistake, that he loved me and hadn't fully understood that until I was gone. I wrote back carefully and kindly told him I didn't feel the same way, and that I thought we'd make the right decision, and that I really did wish him well. He said okay and apologized, and he went quiet for about a week. I thought it was the end of it. He was at my gym on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks later. Came in at 7 like I always do, and he was on a treadmill near the entrance and looked up when I walked in and smiled like he was surprised to see me. We chatted for a few minutes. Totally normal, and I went and did my workout and told myself it was coincidence. He didn't go to that gym when we were together, but people change gyms. Then he was at the coffee shop on Thursday. My coffee shop. The one I went to every Thursday morning before work. It's a place I'd maybe mentioned once in passing during our relationship. Same surprised smile and same friendly chat. Same total normalcy on the surface. Then the grocery store on Saturday, I think. I drove home from the grocery store and sat in my car and made myself say out loud what I've been refusing to think directly. He was following me. Not dramatically and not menacingly, just showing up in my life in places he had no organic reason to be and making it look like coincidence every single time. I sat there in my car and felt the entire pleasant memory of our breakup start to curdle. The texts had been coming every day all through this. Long ones. Late at night mostly, that started to feel less like somebody processing a breakup and more like someone arguing a case. He was rewriting our relationship in real time, in message form, sending me his revised version of things that happened between us. In his version, I had been more invested than I was. In his version, certain conversations had gone differently. In his versions, I was in love with him and he didn't know how to say it, or was scared of it, or was holding back for reasons he was working very hard to understand. I told him to stop contacting me, and he said he understood and respected it. Then he texted me the next morning like I hadn't said that at all. So I ended up blocking him on everything. He made a new Instagram and followed me within a day. I blocked that one. New account 2 days later. I changed my phone number and within a week he had the new one. I still don't know how. A mutual friend told me awkwardly over lunch that Derek had been telling people we were back together, that I was going through something and he was giving me space, that he wasn't worried because he knew how I felt about him. She showed me a screenshot he'd sent her of a text conversation between us that I didn't recognize. The words were mine, pulled from real messages but rearranged and cut and framed in a way that made it look like I was expressing feelings I had never expressed. He had edited our text history and was showing people that edited version. I filed a police report. The officer I spoke to was sympathetic and told me to document everything and that a restraining order was an option, but that I'd need to establish a pattern first. I went home and started a document of every incident with dates and screenshots and felt exhausted and furious and scared in a way I didn't fully have words for yet. Came home on a Wednesday night 3 weeks after that and stood in my doorway and knew immediately that something was wrong. A candle on my kitchen table was lit. I knew I didn't own that candle. Music was coming from my bedroom. Very low. The kind of playlist we used to listen together. I backed out of my apartment and into the hallway and called 911 from outside my neighbor's door. He was sitting on my bed in the dark when they found him. Not hiding and not doing anything. Just sitting there with his hands on his knees waiting. When the officers came in, he looked genuinely confused by the whole situation. Asked them calmly what the problem was. Said he and I had plans and he'd let himself in because he knew I wouldn't mind. Said it the way you'd say something completely reasonable. No aggression or panic. Completely certain of his own version of reality in a way that was more frightening than if he'd been raging. They had to explain to him multiple times that he was being removed from a home that wasn't his because the person who lived there had called the police on him. He kept nodding like he was hearing them and then starting his sentence over from the beginning like the information wasn't landing anywhere. He was arrested. I got my restraining order. The detective who followed up with me called a few days later and mentioned they'd found a journal in his car. She asked me if I wanted to know what was in it, and I said yes, and then immediately wasn't sure I did. He'd been keeping it for 14 months. It started 2 months before we broke up. The relationship it described was not mine. Not in tone, not in detail, not in emotional content. In his journal, I had been deeply in love with him for most of our relationship and was struggling to express it. Our breakup in his journal was me crying and asking him to stay and him being the one who ultimately decided we needed time apart. Not permanently, just time and him waiting for me to be ready to come back. That was the version of events he had been living inside, the whole time. While I was driving home from his apartment feeling sad but okay, he was writing in a journal about how I'd begged him to not go. But none of that happened. I have the texts and I have the voicemails. I have his own words in real time from that Sunday afternoon, and none of it matches a single page of that journal. He just decided. At some point, he looked at our relationship and decided it was something other than what it was, and then lived in that decision so completely that everything that contradicted it stopped registering. My clear and direct rejections became confusion or fear. My blocking him became a test. My calling the police became a misunderstanding that I was patient enough to wait out. The case is still ongoing. He's out on bail. The restraining order is in place, and I've moved to a new apartment that nobody from my old life has the address for. Think about that Sunday afternoon a lot differently now. 2 people sitting in an apartment agreeing that something wasn't working. Both of us crying a little, hugging at the door. I left that apartment and moved on, but he stayed in it in his head and never left. I've been a mechanic for 11 years, and for the last 3 of those, I've been doing overnight maintenance work for a farm operation about 40 minutes outside of town. Big property, commercial scale. The kind of place with equipment worth more than most houses. My job is keeping that equipment running, and sometimes that means being out there at 2 in the morning with a flashlight and a wrench because something broke down and they need it fixed before morning. I work alone out there, pretty much always have. The farm owner lives in the main house about a quarter mile from the equipment barn, and I never see him on overnight calls. He leaves the barn unlocked for me. I fix what needs fixing, I lock up and leave. Simple arrangement, good pay, and never had a problem here. Until about 4 months ago. It was a Tuesday, maybe 1:30 in the morning. I was out there working on a hydraulic line on one of the big tractors. The kind of job that takes a while and gets your hands dirty and requires concentration. The barn has 4 overhead lights that I always run all at once because I need good visibility and I don't love being in a dark space alone at night. I'd been at it for an hour when I heard the door. The equipment barn has 2 entrances, a huge rolling door at the front that I come in through and a regular sized door toward the back. I heard the side door open and then close. One clear motion, not the wind. Not the building settling, a deliberate open and shut. I put my wrench down and listened. Nothing else. I called out and asked if somebody was there and got no response. I grabbed my flashlight and walked the perimeter of the barn, checking between equipment and checking the back corner where the parts shelving was. But nothing still. The side door was closed. I pushed it open and looked out the field behind the barn. Just flat dark land in every direction. No vehicle or light. I went back to work and told myself it was the wind catching the latch. But 20 minutes later I heard breathing, coming from somewhere toward the front of the barn. That specific sound of somebody trying to breathe quietly in a large quiet space. I stood up from where I was crouched by the tractor and looked toward the front of the barn. The rolling door was still closed and the overhead lights were still on. The barn was full of large equipment and deep shadows between it all, and I stood there with my flashlight sweeping it slowly and methodically, and trying to locate a sound that had stopped the moment I stood up. I'm not a person who scares easily, by the way. I've worked alone in the dark and rural places my whole career, and I have a high threshold for things that go bump in the night. But standing in that barn at 2 in the morning, listening to silence where breathing had just been, I felt something I don't feel often, which is genuine uncertainty about whether I was alone or not. I called out again. I pulled out my phone and called the farm owner. It rang several times and he picked up groggy, and I told him I thought somebody might be in the barn with me. He said he'd be down. I stood in the center of the barn with my back to the tractor and my flashlight on and waited. I heard nothing else. 5 minutes later, the farm owner came through the rolling door in his boots and a jacket over his pajamas, and we walked the entire barn together. Every aisle between equipment, behind every large machine, into the small office, in the back corner, everywhere. We found the side door unlatched. The bolt not fully engaged, which meant it had been closed by somebody who didn't know about the bolt or was in a hurry. The farm owner said it could have been one of his workers and that he asked in the morning. He seemed unconcerned. He went back to bed and I finished the job and left. In the morning, he called me and said he'd asked everyone on his crew and nobody had been in the barn that night. Nobody had any reason to be. 2 weeks later, I was back out there for another overnight job, and when I arrived and rolled the main door open and switched the overheads on, I found something on the workbench near the entrance that hadn't been there before. A coffee cup. Still warm. Black coffee with no lid, sitting on the edge of the workbench like somebody had set it down and just stepped away. I stood there and looked at it for a long moment. I called the farm owner again. He came down and looked at it, and neither of us had anything to say about it that made sense. Nobody had authorized to be in that barn. It had been locked since my last visit 2 weeks prior. The cup wasn't his. I still take the overnight calls out there because the money is good and nothing has happened behind those 2 nights. But I lock the side door bolt myself now the moment I arrive, and I keep my phone in my hand the whole time instead of in my pocket. And I haven't touched the coffee cup. It's still on that workbench. The farm owner says he hasn't moved it either. Neither of us had said out loud why we're leaving it there. I think we both just want to know if it moves on its own. So far, it hasn't. I'm going to tell you the story of a terrifying old creep that has stalked me since I was 16 years old. I'm currently 20. So basically, to set the scene, I'm an average height, average size 20-year-old female. I've been told I'm very approachable and perhaps too nice to strangers. I sometimes just don't have the heart to tell people to screw off, and I definitely should sometimes. I worked in a restaurant that was inside a bigger shopping center. My stalker, an old man named Eric, worked for the actual shopping center itself and not a store beside it like me. When I was 16 and first started the job, I was quite timid and awkward and let anyone say pretty much anything to me. I didn't quite know what to say when older customers and other employees would make inappropriate comments to me. I would simply just laugh off whatever people would say or not respond. In my 16-year-old mind, this was a lot easier to handle. I had one other friend at my job who was my age, and her name was Jessica. Jessica had worked there for longer than I had, and one day she asked me if I heard of this guy who worked in the shopping center called Eric. Jessica described Eric as very strange. She didn't describe him as frightening or unsettling, or even someone to be afraid of, just as a very eccentric man. Really, she and other employees would laugh at his odd sayings and awkward behavior. Jessica has told me that Eric brought her a present on Valentine's Day. Chocolate, and anyone would think this was friendly behavior or harmless flirting, if he weren't a 50-something-year-old man bringing chocolates to a 16-year-old girl he barely knows. I began to see for myself that Eric wasn't just an innocent old man with a slight crush. He had other intentions. The first time I remember Eric approaching me was when I was filling up a machine near the entrance of my work. This machine was out of view of all the other employees and the restaurant was empty, so this was pretty much the perfect time for a creep to approach without being seen. Eric wasn't supposed to enter my place of work when he was working at the shopping center, so he had deliberately gone out of his way to come and speak to me. To describe his appearance, he is your typical creepy old loner. He was gaunt, had gray hair and bald patches, and had beady little eyes, which he never averted from yours, and I can't get them out of my head to this day. He must have snuck up on me as I looked up and he was standing right next to me, a little too close. I could feel his breath on my cheek. "My name is Lucy," Eric asked me. "Lucy, are you married?" He almost giggled after he asked me this. He had a smile on his face, which made me feel as if he was trying to pretend that he thought I was older than I was. And at 16, I very obviously looked 16. Eric liked to ask me questions that he already knew the answer to, just to see what my reaction would be, letting me know in his own way that he had been looking up information about me on social media. He would do this often. I began to clock onto the fact that Eric had been going a little further than just approaching me at work and instead stalking my social media accounts in the weeks following this first encounter, such as Twitter and Instagram, where he began asking me very specific questions about things I had posted about in the days before. For example, I had posted on Instagram about a tattoo I got, which was in homage to my favorite band. I was serving a customer one day, only to be interrupted by a shrill but quiet voice. It was Eric. His eyes were huge, and he had a look of pure excitement and menace on his face. He had yet again entered my workplace when he wasn't supposed to, just to talk to me. He asked me, "Lucy, what's your favorite insert, band here, song?" Eric relished in my discomfort. You could see by my reaction that I was clocking on to the fact that he'd been viewing my personal social media, and thought of that made my blood run cold. I felt disgusting and violated. The tattoo I had gotten was covered by my work uniform, so the only way he could have seen it was by going through my Instagram page. This creeped me out majorly, but somehow I just forced myself to forget all about it and carried on working. Over the course of a few months, Eric would come into my workplace more and more frequently, asking me bizarre questions and still reciting back to me things that I had tweeted about or posted on Instagram. Every time I would see him, I would get visibly uncomfortable. He liked this. I could tell it's what he wanted. All the while this was happening, Jessica approached me and let me know that Eric had followed her in his car on her walk home from work, slowing down to ask her where she lived. I had also been told of other disturbing news about Eric from different people. It seemed as if he were becoming more invested in whatever his intentions were toward me and Jessica. News had traveled to one of my managers about Eric's unsettling actions towards me, and this manager informed me that a few years ago Eric was rumored to have followed a young girl who used to work for our restaurant in a toilet. Things didn't quite make sense to me. He was known for being a creep, yet still employed at the shopping center. On one hand, I was glad to know I wasn't just creeped out for no reason, but on the other hand, I was frightened, as he'd been doing this for years, yet no one had stopped him. Anyways, there was a woman who worked at the same place as me called Rebecca, and she had some sort of disability that caused her to befriend and be trusting to people without knowing anything about them. It seems that Eric took advantage of her, as he had asked her for her phone number and she gave it to him. Rebecca had shown me her text with Eric. He had texted her things like, "Rebecca, are you alone?" and "Are you sitting on the bus alone?" But the most unsettling part of it all was the text from Eric that read, "Rebecca, could you please let me know any information on the girls that work at insert restaurant name here?" I was stunned. This was quite slowly turning into my nightmare. I was constantly questioning why this old man was so hell-bent on finding out everything to do with my life. Like, why me? He had gone out of his way to source information about me through a vulnerable person I worked with, and I was scared he was going to go further. This creeped me out still, but for some reason I forgot about it and carried on with my life, which was very hectic at the time, and in a way I'm grateful that I didn't have the time to dwell on Eric's growing obsession. However, this was something I wouldn't be able to ignore forever, as Eric began inserting himself into my life in ways I couldn't just ignore or brush off. One night I was watching the movie Grease with my family, and I must have tweeted something like, "Grease is my favorite film, because it's a great film, right?" Anyways, the morning after my tweet, Eric approaches me in his usual way and utters, "Do you like the film Grease, Lucy?" The same usual smile lit up on his face, and the same usual wave of disgust washed over me. He was really making it a point to let me know he was watching me. I tried to carry on with my day, but spent the entirety of my shift feeling a little bit shaken up. To somebody listening to this story, it may not seem as unsettling to you as it did to me at the time, but when somebody is going out of their way to make sure you know they know information about you, you spend every waking hour thinking about what they plan to do with this information and why they insist on taunting you with it. The very second I clocked out of work and got into my car, my phone went off. This was a notification for PayPal. I clicked on the notification to see that I received £3 from an Eric Stanley. And the note attached to it read, "To Lucy, Grease is the word, from Eric." He literally found my PayPal account and sent me £3 with a quote from the movie attached to it. This wasn't crazy enough. In the days following, I received a string of anonymous calls, incessant calls, and one after another. I was in floods of tears and ended up having a huge panic attack. I felt like there was no escape. My phone rang and rang and rang all night. I had to turn it off to get away. Even when I turned my phone back on, the calls continued, and every time my phone would ring, my head felt like it was being impaled with the sharpest knife in the world. I was on complete edge. The phone calls that I did answer were just somebody breathing down the phone, making it a point to breathe heavily. I even swear that they were trying to sound like they were jerking themselves off, which sickened me. I have no proof that this was Eric, but it wasn't hard to put two and two together after all the lengths he had gone to in order to track down my personal information. If he had found out my PayPal address, my phone number, and all of my social media accounts, what was stopping him from finding out where I live, breaking in or hurting me or my family? That night I had horrific dreams in which he chased me around the house and taunted me for hours. I still have similar dreams and struggle to sleep without my boyfriend present, as I'm scared he's standing right outside my door to this day. I reported Eric to my managers, and they passed my complaint on to the managers of the shopping center. At this point, I was genuinely scared for my safety. Multiple girls added to my statement and added details of times they had witnessed Eric's unsettling behaviors or times he had been inappropriate with them too. Eric had been cautioned by the shopping center's management, yet nothing was done except the fact that he was warned not to talk to me. Eric found ways around the no talking to Lucy rule. He would make animal noises at me when he would see me, like a monkey or a dog does, or any bizarre noise that would get my attention. I think he just wanted me to think that he had outsmarted me and found a way around the rules. After this, I stopped working at the restaurant as a full-time job and saw Eric less and less, which was obviously great for me. I moved cities as I went away from university and made new friends, which distracted me from my old life in my hometown. I still thought about Eric every now and then, and when I focused on it for too long, I couldn't be alone, out of fear that he was still keeping tabs on me. The thought of that terrified me. After moving away and starting a new life, I forgot all about the twisted little man who used to obsess over me at my old job. I forgot he existed, but I was soon going to remember. Christmas Day, I was back home in my hometown with my parents. My phone buzzed, and I expected it to just be another message from a friend or a family member, but I was wrong. I received a notification from PayPal, and it was the same exact amount of £3, only not from Eric this time, but from a girl whose name I didn't recognize at all. I opened up the PayPal app only to see a note attached to this payment I had received. The note read, "Sending on behalf of Eric." My blood ran cold again. I had forgotten all about this man and all he had done to make me feel unsafe and unsettled, and here he was again antagonizing me, yet this time doing it through other people. Perhaps his way of telling me that him being banned from talking to me himself won't stop him from entering my world. I threw my phone down on the couch and spent the night drinking with my family until I forgot about the notification. I probably should have told somebody about it, but I just wanted to do as much as I could to block him out. I didn't want him to control me anymore, and I since haven't seen or heard anything from him, and I want it to stay that way. I think Eric still works at the shopping center and lives local to me. I avoid my old workplace so I don't have to see him and he doesn't have to see me. This is a true story. Every time I tell it, it pulls the eyes of everybody in the room. I'm not sure why I haven't posted it before, but upon reflecting with a friend, I decided it was time to share. In the summer of 2020, my friends Alex and Violet and I decided to go on a mountain vacation. COVID cabin fever had hit us hard and we were desperate to get out. We settled on a mountain estate and planned to camp and hike at several different locations. For one night, we thought it would be fun to book a cabin in the woods. Violet's parents had rented a fire tower once and loved it, but a cabin beside a fire tower was all we could find. It was cheap, clean, and secluded. Excited to have a night where we could be as obnoxious as we wanted, we booked it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, we decided it would be a great idea to drop acid at the cabin. Violet brought an entire sheet in preparation for our arrival, and it was tucked in her bag as we pulled out the driveway to make our way to the cabin. I remember this knot in the pit of my stomach, like this aching feeling that gnawed at me. I told Alex and Violet that there was no way we could drop acid that night. Violet was upset. We turned around and got into a massive argument, but I stood my ground because I just knew we had no business doing it that night. Finally, the fireworks settled and we were off. The cabin was roughly 30 minutes away from the nearest town. I sat atop a mountain. We held our breath as we rounded the busted road that spiraled toward the top. There were no pull-offs, no other campsites, just a long winding road that led us to the cabin at the peak. We settled in and started a fire to keep warm. As dusk gave way to night, we heard the unmistakable noise of an engine on the road, then the flash of headlights. A side-by-side with 3 kids arrived, and our nerves settled. They smiled, gave us a wave, climbed the fire tower and left. We'd heard there may be occasional visitors to the fire tower, but they were the only ones who'd come by. We doused the fire and moved inside. Eated some hot dogs until they were lukewarm, ate them fast and sat in the silence. You really don't know how quiet it is until you're in the middle of nowhere. You can literally hear every rustle of the leaves and the whisper of the wind through the branches. You get so used to white noise living in the city. There's always the hum of an air conditioner or the dim roar of traffic to focus on. Here the closest thing to white noise was the sound of our own breathing. We jumped at every noise, too frightened to speak to one another. And finally, I'd had enough. I cracked a few wine coolers, passed them to Alex and Violet, and slapped a board game down on the table between our bunk beds. It didn't take long for us to loosen up, and we were laughing, having the good time we'd envisioned. Much soberer than we thought, but enough that we were able to ignore the rumble of the woods. Later, we'd all recall hearing noises in the background, the snap of a twig, the dim rumble of an engine. None of us wanted to rupture the air of nonchalance between us, so we ignored it. Until a human hand reached up to the window between us and slapped it 3 times. We were screaming in an instant. Alex called 911, put them on speakerphone, and handed his cell to me. He grabbed pokers from the fireplace and passed them out. Violet started calling family members and saying her last goodbyes. I held my breath and listened for any more noise. Whoever this was, whatever this was, would have heard us call 911, and now they were being careful to make a silent retreat. Dispatch arrived 20 minutes later, a lucky thing for a 1 a.m. emergency call, and had their dogs called them out in. Nothing. They suggested it may have been a bear, but I could tell from their faces that they didn't believe that for a second. We'd barely cooked those hot dogs, and why would a bear smack the window by a couple of screaming kids, rather than the one closest to the pan we used to cook? Why would a bear knock on the window like a human? Why, when we screamed, did the bear make a stealthy retreat? They had no answers. But they had one anecdote. As they'd sped to us, they'd come across a car at the base of the mountain, but that was the only sign of life they'd seen. I remember my blood ran cold, but Violet and Alex were too frazzled to absorb the weight of what they'd said and dizzied by a new horror. Violet's car, thoroughly dusted by our drive up the mountain, was covered in handprints. Handprints that didn't match ours, that touched places we had it. We grabbed our stuff by the armful and threw it inside, eager to remove every part of ourselves from this mountain. We followed the police, grateful every pothole found us further and further from that wretched cabin. We made it down in record time and found lodging at a seedy hotel that reeked of cat piss. I couldn't sleep. The thought of that car on the road rang in my head. Remember, there was nothing else on that mountain. It was a narrow road to the top. No pull-offs, no other campsites. There was the fire tower. Maybe a visitor decided to spook us during their late-night excursion. But the kids from earlier, we'd seen their headlights. Whoever did this had stopped their vehicle further down the road and hiked the rest of the way. They didn't want to be spotted. They wanted silence and secrecy. Whoever this was hadn't been looking for a cheap scare. They planned this. I don't think I'll ever know what the person on the mountain wanted from me. I don't know if it was a practical joke or the beginning of a night of terror. I'm grateful for Alex's quick wit in calling 911. I wonder if our visitor knew we had service. It had certainly been a welcome surprise to us. Perhaps that was a wrench in his plan, enough to spook him before he could make things ugly. In truth, I don't know if I want to know.